Okay, so you're all about this fasting thing, which, awesome. But there's a snag. Diarrhea? Mid-fast? Yeah, not so awesome. So what's going on? What can you do about it? And, like, what's the science behind it all? Well, we gotcha. We've dug through, like, tons of research articles, expert opinions, all that, to help you figure this out.
You know, it's fascinating, really. This whole fasting thing, there's so much we're still learning. It's this mix of, ancient practices and, like, cutting edge science. And sometimes those two worlds, well, they collide in unexpected ways.
Totally. Like, we hear about all the benefits, right? Weight loss, less inflammation, maybe even a healthier heart. Yeah, I was reading something from the Mayo Clinic. They were saying regular fasting might be good for cholesterol and blood sugar control. But then, bam, diarrhea hits. And you're like, wait, is this normal? Is my body freaking out?
It's tricky, yeah, because some studies, right, they suggest those benefits you mentioned, but they often focus on specific types of fasting and those long-term effects. We're still figuring those out. It's important to remember this everyone's body reacts differently.
Okay, so not a magic bullet. Got it. But let's get practical. You're dealing with diarrhea during your fasts, which has got to be frustrating. So what's like the first line of defense?
Hydration, absolutely. See, with diarrhea, your body's losing fluids and electrolytes like crazy. So water, lots and lots of water. And skip the sugary drinks and caffeine. Those can actually make dehydration worse.
Oh, really? Why is that? What's going on in the gut? That makes those drinks a bad idea.
Well, think of it this way. Those sugary drinks, they can actually pull more water into your intestines, which obviously is the opposite of what you want when you're trying to, firm things up. And caffeine, well, that can stimulate bowel movements, which could make the diarrhea worse.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So water is king. But what about those electrolyte drinks, like Gatorade or Pedialyte? I've heard those can be helpful.
Definitely. They can help replenish those lost electrolytes, sodium, potassium, all that good stuff. That helps your body function properly. You can also get electrolytes from certain foods, even when you're dealing with diarrhea.
Oh, really? So even though we're talking about fasting, there's still a role for food, even when things are, well, loosey-goosey down there.
Exactly. Think about foods high in soluble fiber, like bananas or applesauce. That type of fiber absorbs water in the gut, which can help firm up your stool. And don't forget about potassium and salt. You can get those from things like broth, or even just adding a pinch of salt to your water.
Okay, that's helpful. So lots of water, maybe some electrolyte drinks, and even some strategic food choices. But what if those home remedies aren't cutting it? Is it game over for the fast?
Not necessarily. There are over-the-counter medications like Imodium, which has loperamide, or Pepto-Bismol with bismuth subsalicylic. Both of those can provide relief. But always a good idea to check with your doctor or pharmacist before starting any new megs, especially while fasting.
Right, of course. Safety first. Now, let's say you do need to break your fast. Because of the diarrhea, what's the best way to ease back into eating?
Gentle, gentle, the brat diet, bananas, rice, applesauce, toast. It's a classic for a reason. These foods are bland, starchy, and low in fiber, so they won't irritate your gut. They let your digestive system kind of chill out and recover.
So small, simple meals, got it, and definitely avoid anything fried. Or those gas-inducing culprits, like beans and broccoli.
Exactly. Now, you also sent us some research on time-restricted feeding, or TRF. I think this could be really relevant to your situation.
Oh yeah, TRF. So that's basically setting a window of time for eating and fasting the rest of the day, right? Like the warrior diet with a 4-hour eating window, or the 18.6 diet with a 6-hour window.
You got it. And there's a super interesting study in the journal Cell Metabolism that looked at both 4-hour and 6-hour TRF in adults struggling with obesity. And get this, both groups lost similar amounts of weight, about 3%, over 8 weeks. And they didn't even have to count calories.
Wait, hold on. They lost weight without calorie counting just by timing their meals. That sounds almost too good to be true. What's the catch?
Well, there are a few nuances to consider. First, while the weight loss was significant, 3% might not be a dramatic transformation for everyone. And the study focused on adults with obesity, so the results might not be directly applicable to everyone. But the concept is still pretty compelling.
Yeah, I mean, 3% without stressing over calories, that's a pretty good starting point, right? And you mentioned there were other benefits besides weight loss.
Absolutely. The study also found that TRS helped reduce insulin resistance, which is a big deal because that's a precursor to type 2 diabetes. And it also lowered oxidative stress.
Okay, oxidative stress, I've heard that term before, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what it actually means. Can you break it down for us?
Sure, oxidative stress. It's basically what happens when there's an imbalance between free radicals, those unstable molecules in your body, and antioxidants, which are like the body's defense system against them. Too many free radicals, well, they can damage cells and contribute to aging and disease.
So it's like rust forming on a car. Too much of it, and things start to break down.
That's a great analogy. And what's exciting about this study is that it suggests that TRF might actually help protect your cells from that kind of damage. Plus, it seems like people were able to stick with it pretty well. High compliance means it might be more sustainable than other diets.
That's huge. So many diets fail because they're just too hard to keep up. But this TRF thing, it's more about when you eat, not what you eat. So it might be easier to fit into your life. Okay, so we're getting a clearer picture here. Fasting has potential benefits, but diarrhea can be a roadblock. Home remedies and medications can help. And this TRF thing might be worth exploring.
Exactly. But you also mentioned some curiosity about flax seeds and honey, and I think those deserve some attention too.
Oh yeah, those were kind of separate from the diarrhea issue. But I'm curious how they might fit into the bigger picture of fasting and gut health. Like, could they be part of a strategy to prevent diarrhea in the first place?
That's a great question. Flax seeds, they're nutritional powerhouses. They've got omega-3 fats, fiber, and these beneficial plant compounds called lignans.
I've heard lignans are good for you. But honestly, I don't know why. What's the big deal about them?
Well, for one thing, they're powerful antioxidants, which helps fight that oxidative stress we were talking about. But what's really interesting is that they also have effects similar to estrogen in the body.
Wait, really? Plant compounds mimicking hormones. That's wild. So how does that relate to gut health and fasting?
That's where the research gets a bit more speculative. Some early studies suggest that lignans might have prebiotic effects, meaning they could help feed the good bacteria in your gut, and a healthy gut microbiome. Well, that's definitely linked to better digestion and overall health.
Okay, so maybe incorporating flax seeds into your diet before a fast could help prep your gut and potentially reduce the chances of diarrhea. That's fascinating. What about honey? Where does that fit in?
Honey, especially raw honey, that's interesting. It's straight from the beehive, no processing or pasteurization, so it's got all sorts of goodies. Antioxidants, vitamins, even bee pollen and propolis. People have used it for centuries. For coughs, wound healing, and you guessed it, diarrhea.
That's cool. But is it safe to have honey during a fast? Wouldn't the sugar break the fast?
That's where it gets a bit tricky. Technically, yes, honey does have sugar, so it would technically break a fast. But some people argue that the type of sugar in honey, mostly fructose and glucose, is digested differently and might not have the same impact on insulin and blood sugar as other sugars. Plus, the potential benefits for gut health could outweigh the slight break in the fast, depending on your goals.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe it depends on the type of fast you're doing and your individual tolerance. This is definitely something to research further. But I'm loving how we're connecting these seemingly random things, diarrhea, flax seeds, honey, back to the bigger picture of fasting and gut health.
It's all connected, right? And the more we learn about those connections, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions about our health.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We talked about the potential benefits of fasting, the dreaded diarrhea dilemma, some home remedies, medications, even touched on TRF, flax seeds, and honey. Where do we go from here?
I think it's time to dive deeper into that TRF study, particularly how it relates to preventing diarrhea during fasting. There might be some valuable clues there. And then let's explore those mental and emotional aspects of fasting that you mentioned earlier.
Perfect. Because fasting isn't just about the physical stuff, right? It's a whole body, whole mind experience.
Exactly. And understanding that bigger picture is essential for creating a fasting experience that truly nourishes you, inside and out.
Okay, so we're back, and I have to admit that whole lignans mimicking estrogen thing really blew my mind. Plants are so much more complex than we give them credit for.
Right. It's like they have this secret language they're speaking, and we're just beginning to decipher it.
Exactly. But let's bring it back to our main mystery here, those pesky bouts of diarrhea during fasting. You mentioned that TRF study might hold some clues about prevention.
It might. You see, most research on fasting and digestion focuses on the initial 24-48 hours. But you mentioned that your diarrhea tends to hit around day 3, which is interesting because it falls outside that typical time frame.
So we're kind of in uncharted territory here.
In a way, yes, which is why this TRF study with its longer eating windows might offer some insights. Remember, they didn't see a significant increase in diarrhea among the TRF participants compared to the control group.
Okay, but hold on. If some people experience diarrhea during fasting, and this study didn't show an increase with TRF. Doesn't that kind of contradict what we know?
It's not necessarily a contradiction, more like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit yet. Here's a thought: maybe the timing of those eating windows played a role. They had folks eating either from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Those later eating times could be more in sync with our natural digestive rhythms, leading to better regularity.
So maybe our bodies are just better at processing food and well eliminating waste later in the day. It's like giving your digestive system a clear schedule to follow.
Exactly. And if you think about it, traditional cultures often ate their main meals in the evening. Maybe there's an evolutionary reason for that, aligning our eating patterns with our body's natural rhythms.
I love how we're connecting those ancient practices with modern science. It's like we're coming full circle. So for you listening, if diarrhea is putting a damper on your fasting experience, don't lose hope. We talked about those home remedies, hydration, electrolytes, strategic food choices. Those are your frontline defenses.
And if you're feeling adventurous, maybe experiment with different TRF eating windows. It might not solve the problem entirely, but it could help.
It's all about finding what works best for your body, right?
Absolutely. Fasting isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone's digestive system is unique. And let's be real, there are so many variations of fasting out there: intermittent fasting, alternate day fasting, water fasting. The list goes on. It's important to find a method that aligns with your goals and lifestyle.
You know what's fascinating to me is how we're realizing that it's not just about what you eat or even how much you eat, but also when you eat. That timing element seems to play a bigger role than we initially thought.
It's like we've cracked open a whole new dimension of nutrition, and this TRF research is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to discover about how our eating patterns impact our health, both physically and mentally.
Now, speaking of mental and emotional health, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, that fasting can be a journey of self-discovery.
Yes, it's not just a physical challenge, it can be a profound inner experience as well.
Totally. I've heard people say that fasting helps them connect with their willpower, their discipline.
It's more than just willpower, though. It's about cultivating awareness, tuning into your body's signals, and developing a deeper understanding of your relationship with food.
I think a lot of people, myself included, have this kind of love-hate relationship with food. It's something we need to survive, but it can also be a source of comfort stress, even guilt. Fasting kind of forces you to confront those complex emotions.
Exactly. It strips away the distractions and allows you to really examine those patterns and habits that might be driving your eating choices. And sometimes what you discover can be surprising.
You know, it's almost like hitting the reset button on your relationship with food. It's a chance to step back, observe, and make conscious choices about how you want to nourish yourself, both physically and emotionally.
And that's where the real power of fasting lies. It's not just about weight loss or any other external goal. It's about cultivating a deeper connection with yourself, a sense of empowerment and self-awareness that extends far beyond the fasting period itself.
So it's not just about what happens during the fast, but also how it changes you afterwards.
Exactly. It's about incorporating those insights and lessons learned into your everyday life, creating a more mindful and sustainable approach to food and well-being.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today: diarrhea remedies, TRF, the mental and emotional aspects of fasting, but I have a feeling there's still more to explore.
There always is. Fasting is a vast and ever-evolving field with new research emerging all the time, but I think we've given you a solid foundation to build upon.
You've definitely given me a lot to think about, but before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on one last piece of the puzzle. Okay, so we've talked about all these potential benefits of fasting, but there's this one thing that keeps popping up in the research. It's something called autophagy.
Ah, yes, autophagy. It's a fascinating process. Essentially, it's the body's way of cleaning house.
Okay, so like spring cleaning for your cells. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Exactly. Imagine your cells have these little recycling centers. They break down damaged or unnecessary components, and then they reuse those building blocks to create new, healthy parts.
So it's like decluttering and upcycling all in one. That's amazing. But how does this relate to fasting?
Well, research suggests that fasting can actually trigger autophagy when you deprive your body of food for a certain period of time. It's like flipping a switch that activates these cellular cleanup crews.
So by not eating, we're actually encouraging our bodies to do some deep internal cleaning. That's pretty counterintuitive.
It is, but it makes sense when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors didn't have access to a constant food supply. They went through periods of feast and famine, and during those times of famine, their bodies had to adapt to survive. They had to become more efficient at recycling and repairing.
Wow, so fasting is like tapping into this ancient survival mechanism. It's like giving our bodies a chance to catch up on some much-needed maintenance.
Exactly. And autophagy has been linked to a whole host of potential benefits: improved brain function, reduced inflammation, even protection against certain diseases.
Okay, I have to admit this whole autophagy thing is blowing my mind. It's like we're learning that our bodies are capable of so much more than we ever imagined.
We are, and I think that's one of the most exciting things about fasting research. It's constantly challenging our assumptions and revealing new layers of complexity within the human body.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, fasting isn't just about weight loss or digestive health. It's about tapping into this incredible self-healing power that we all possess.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about empowering ourselves, taking control of our health, and recognizing that our bodies are capable of extraordinary things.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from diarrhea remedies to TRF, from flax seeds and honey to autophagy, and the importance of listening to your body's wisdom.
It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating topics with you.
Likewise. And for you listening, I hope this deep dive has given you a newfound appreciation for the power of fasting and the incredible resilience of the human body.
Remember, fasting is a personal journey. There's no one-size-fits-all approach experience. Listen to your body and approach this practice with curiosity and self-compassion.
And who knows, you might just surprise yourself with what you discover along the way.
Happy fasting!